I never thought a simple grocery run would turn into something I'd never forget. It all started when an older woman told a young black guy to go back to Africa. What happened after that didn't just hush the store, it changed everything. The store had the usual buzz of people checking off their shopping lists. Carts rolled down the aisles, a mix of folks chatting while others just zoned out. It was a warm afternoon in a little neighborhood in Indiana, the kind of place where everybody seemed to know everybody. But that day, things took a turn no one saw coming. Over near the fruit section, I noticed an older woman, maybe late 70s, fiddling with her glasses while reaching for a bag of apples. She looked harmless enough, silver hair pinned neat, cardigan a bit worn, but there was an edge to her, muttering like she was already annoyed. Just a few steps away, a younger guy walked up, his name was Marcus. Tall, wearing a blue hoodie and jeans, just minding his business. He was balancing his basket in one arm and scrolling on his phone while grabbing a bag of oranges. Calm, polite, blending in like anyone else. That's when she spotted him. Her whole face shifted, eyes narrowed, lips pressed tight. And then, right there in front of everyone, she snapped, "You people don't belong here." Her voice carried enough that folks nearby couldn't ignore it. Marcus froze, phone still in his hand. When he finally looked up, she doubled down, "Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from?" The whole store went still. A couple shoppers stopped mid-step, trading uneasy looks. Others acted like they hadn't heard a thing, but the silence gave them away. The hum of everyday life was gone, replaced with this thick, awkward pause that just hung in the air. Marcus's eyebrows pulled together. For a second, it looked like he was about to fire back. But he didn't. Instead, he drew a slow breath, steady, like he was carefully picking through every possible word. The woman didn't back off. Still clutching her apples, she stood firm, chin raised like she was daring him to answer. You could feel the tension wrapping around the whole aisle. A young mom hurried her kid down the next row. An older man by the potatoes froze, watching Marcus with that nervous, "What's he gonna do" look. Marcus stood perfectly still, gripping his basket handle tight. The world seemed to shrink down to just him and her. Every whisper, every creak in the store faded out. All that remained was the weight of her words, heavy in the air. Even the workers froze. One kid stacking bananas had stopped mid-motion. A cashier was craning her neck from across the room. Nobody came closer, but nobody left either. They were part of it now, whether they liked it or not. Marcus finally straightened up, shifting the basket to his other hand. He looked calm, but his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 thoughts. His presence seemed to grow, like he was quietly filling the space. And when he spoke, his voice was calm but sharp enough to slice through the tension. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "do you realize what you just said?" He wasn't yelling. He wasn't accusing. He was giving her a chance, one last chance to think. But she didn't. She snapped back, louder this time, "I said what I said. This is my country. People like you don't belong here." The crowd gasped. A young woman near the bread aisle covered her mouth. Murmurs rose, but Marcus stayed planted, steady as a rock. He didn't move toward her. He didn't raise his voice. He just let her words hang in the air for everyone to hear. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. His calmness wasn't weak, it was powerful, unsettling even. "Since you brought it up, let's talk about that." The store went silent again, tighter this time. You could almost feel everyone lean in. Marcus set his basket down gently on the floor, like he was grounding himself before what was about to come. He locked eyes with her, not angry, but with this quiet strength that made her shift in place. His voice carried, steady but firm. "You said I don't belong here." Marcus looked straight at her and said, "Let me tell you something about where I come from." His voice wasn't loud, but every word carried weight, like each one had been chosen with care. "My great-great-grandfather was born in Mississippi," he continued, pausing just long enough for the words to sink in. He worked as a sharecropper, breaking his back on land that never belonged to him, all so his kids could hope for something better. His father? He was a slave, kidnapped, beaten, and sold like property. And for what? To help build the very country you're standing in. The older woman pressed her lips tight, but said nothing. The people around us, though, were locked in. A guy near the dairy section lowered his phone. An older couple whispered to each other, eyes fixed on Marcus. He kept going, his voice gaining strength. My grandfather fought in World War II. This country shipped him off overseas to risk his life. And when he came back, he still wasn't allowed to sit at the same counters or drink from the same fountains as everyone else. But he stayed. Do you know why? Because he believed in the promise of this place, even when the country didn't believe in him. The whole store seemed to fall into a hush. Even the hum of the refrigerators in the back sounded quieter, like the world itself was listening. And my parents, Marcus went on, his tone softening without losing its power. They fought, too. Not with guns, not with fists, but by raising me to work hard, to respect people, to lead with kindness. My mom's a teacher. She's spent her life helping kids, no matter who they are. My dad's a mechanic. He's the type of man who'd pull over to help you if your car broke down, no questions asked. He let the words hang for a moment, still locked on her. So, when you say I don't belong here, when you tell me to go back to Africa. He shook his head slightly, sadness creeping into his voice. Ma'am, I am as much a part of this country as you are, maybe even more, because my family paid for it in blood, sweat, and tears. Her face turned red. The apples in her hand shook as if her fingers had lost their strength. She opened her mouth like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Marcus stepped back, calm as ever. I could have just walked away, he said, this time looking at everyone, not just her. But what would that solve? Ignorance doesn't disappear in silence. If we want better, we have to be better. All of us. The words settled heavy on the room. For a beat, no one dared move. The woman's face flickered through emotions, anger, embarrassment, and maybe, just maybe, a spark of shame. She glanced around, as if searching for backup. None came. Then, from the crowd, a middle-aged guy in a baseball cap stepped forward. He's right, he said, breaking the silence. We've got to do better than this. It was like he broke a spell. An older woman near the frozen foods aisle nodded through trembling lips. My dad fought in that same war, she said softly. He always told me the only color that mattered was the red on the flag. Murmurs spread. A young cashier, maybe 19 or 20, called out from her station, I've never seen anyone handle something like that with so much grace. Thank you. The older woman who started it all stood frozen, clutching her cart. She didn't apologize, but the fire in her eyes was gone. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost desperate, I didn't mean, but she couldn't finish. Marcus's tone softened, but his words cut deeper than before. It's not about what you meant. It's about how it came out. Words matter. And actions matter even more. From the deli counter, someone began clapping, hesitant at first, but soon joined by others. The sound grew, rolling through the aisles. People weren't just clapping for Marcus's words. They were clapping for the way he stood up, with dignity instead of hate. The elderly woman looked around one last time, pale now, before pushing her cart toward the exit. As she slipped away, a few shoppers stepped up to Marcus. A woman gently touched his shoulder and said, "Thank you. You said what needed to be said." Marcus gave a small smile, lifting his basket back into his hand. Sometimes, he said, almost more to himself than to anyone else, it's not about winning or losing. It's about making sure the truth gets heard. Little by little, the crowd broke apart. The tension was gone, replaced by reflection. Some folks looked inspired. Others just thoughtful. But one thing was certain, nobody in that store walked away unchanged. The moment itself had passed, but the weight of Marcus's words didn't fade. What happened next would stick with people far beyond that grocery store. As shoppers drifted back to their routines, something in the air felt different, quieter, more thoughtful. Marcus finished grabbing the rest of what he needed, moving through the aisles with steady steps, like he was still working through everything that had just happened. He wasn't shaken, but you could see he was reflective. At the checkout, the young cashier who had spoken up earlier rang up his groceries. She offered a shy smile. What you said back there, she hesitated, then pushed through. It meant a lot. Most folks wouldn't stand up like that, especially not with the kind of grace you showed. Marcus gave her a warm smile in return. Sometimes grace is the only way through, he told her gently. Anger just builds walls. Outside, the sun was starting to dip low, throwing long shadows across the parking lot. As Marcus walked toward his car, he noticed the older woman sitting inside her own, both hands clenched on the steering wheel. For a moment, he thought about going over. But he didn't. Some lessons need time to settle, and he'd already said what needed saying. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his dad, telling him the story. His father, a man who didn't waste words, just listened, his hands folded neatly in front of him. You did the right thing, son, he finally said. Not just for yourself, but for everyone else watching. Folks like her might not change overnight, but you planted a seed. And that's all you can do sometimes, plant the seed, and let it grow. Marcus nodded, the truth of his father's words sinking in. He realized then that as uncomfortable as the moment had been, it was necessary. Ignorance doesn't go away unless you face it head-on. Silence only lets it spread. Across town, the older woman sat at her dining room table, staring at a plate of food she hadn't touched. Marcus's words kept circling in her head, breaking through the armor she had worn for so long. She thought about her own grandchildren, about the kind of world they'd inherit. And for the first time in years, she felt something unexpected, doubt. In the days that followed, word of what had happened at that grocery store spread through the community. People talked about Marcus, about his courage, about the way he carried himself with dignity. It became more than just an incident. It became a reminder of what words can do, and why standing up matters. Marcus never went looking for recognition. But his actions rippled through the town in ways he hadn't imagined. Strangers stopped him to say thank you, some even sharing their own stories of prejudice and resilience. His calm stand had sparked conversations people had avoided for far too long. And the older woman? Slowly, something inside her began to shift. It wasn't overnight, but the old certainties didn't feel as firm as they once had. She didn't know if she'd ever see Marcus again. But if she did, she hoped she'd have the courage to apologize. Moments like that remind us of the power of kindness, strength, and truth in the face of ignorance. They show us that standing up doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it means speaking calmly, with conviction, and letting the truth do its work. So if you're hearing this, let it serve as a reminder, your words and actions matter. They can wound, or they can heal. They can drive people apart, or they can pull us together. And if this story meant something to you, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it. Pass it along. Because the more we spread courage, hope, and understanding, the closer we get to building a better world.